Hello there, this is L24 World News and these are your headlines. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Freetown, Sierra Leone on Wednesday, protesting inflation and the rising cost of living in the West African country. U.S. charges Iranian man of a suspected plot to kill the ex-Trump advisor, John Bolton. Satellite images appear to show major damage and number of destroyed Russian warplanes at Crimea Air Base following explosions there this week. A year ago, since taking over Afghanistan's ruling, Taliban authorities have imposed severe restrictions on women's and girls' rights. Several regions across Sudan have again witnessed heavy rainstorms on Tuesday, killing at least 3 people and partially destroying hundreds of homes across River Nile state. Hello again and good afternoon, I'm your host Abdulrahim Kashor and those were today's top stories. First in our topical news, hundreds of protesters took to the street of Freetown, Sierra Leone on Wednesday, protesting inflation and rising costs of living in the West African country. The protests grew violent. Videos show seriously injured protesters and some members of security forces. Osama Yadi.
Anti-government protesters in Sierra Leone clashed with police in the streets of the capital on Wednesday, as tensions over the rising cost of living turned deadly in the West African nation.
The profit we're supposed to have is not there anymore. We're suffering. Even to get food is difficult. Our husbands are not working. We're the ones paying house rent and taking care of the home.
The protesters were calling for the departure of the president Julius Maada Bio, who was elected in 2018 and still has 10 months left in his term.
These unscrupulous individuals have embarked on a violent and unauthorized protest which has led to the loss of lives of innocent Sierra Leoneans, including security personnel.
Vice President Mohamed Judah Jali said that lives of both policemen and civilians were lost. Without giving further details, he announced a nationwide curfew from 3 p.m. local time in a bid to stem the violence.
Government hereby declares a nationwide curfew with effect from today, Wednesday, 10th August 2022, commencing at 3 p.m.
The government has criticized the unidentified organizers of the protest, warning that the country has already suffered enough through more than a decade of civil war that ended in 2002. The cost of living in Sierra Leone has risen by more than 40% within the last few months, in addition to electricity and fuel prices, which have also spiked in an unprecedented manner.
Still in Africa, at least 5 people, including 2 policemen, were killed in an attack on a prison in which about 705 inmates escaped in Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern town of Butembo. Rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces attacked the prison early Wednesday during a transfer of prisoners, which left 3 attackers burned to death.
La prison centrale de Butembo a été attaquée.
The central prison of Butembo was effectively attacked by terrorists who came from Malika Valley to here in Butembo.
À partir de la vallée de Malika jusqu'à ici à Butembo.
I work as a nurse. I looked after the prisoners. I did not flee because I did not want to take advantage and flee in disorder. I'm waiting for the liberation that God will send me. My hope is that one day I will leave here legally with all the documents. I did not want to take advantage because the bandits came to free us. I decided to stay here.
Within the same continent, always several regions across Sudan have again witnessed heavy rainstorms on Tuesday, killing at least 3 people and partially destroying hundreds of homes across River Nile State, Khartoum. The River Nile Civil Defense Department suspended vehicles from crossing a number of roads in the state. Days of torrential rain have washed away sections of Khartoum Port Sudan National Road as well as the Atabara flooded road. To a different matter now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits President Paul Kagame in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, as part of his 3-nation trip to the African continent. Hussein Barkan.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Rwandan President Paul Kagame in Kigali on Thursday, the third and final leg of his African tour after South Africa and the Democratic Republic of Congo. His visit to Kigali comes a day after his talks in Democratic Republic of the Congo, which largely focused on Rwandan support for rebel group operating in the east. Widely documented by United Nations report released in early August but categorically denied by Kigali. The American diplomat should also discuss the human rights situation in Rwanda, regularly denounced by civil society and international NGOs.
The failure to respond to Rwanda's appalling human rights record has only encouraged Rwanda's officials to pursue abuses, even beyond its borders.
Rwandan opposition leader Victoire Ingabire, who herself spent 6 years in prison for terrorism, urged Blinken to raise the issue of imprisoned journalists and politicians for opposing Paul Kagame's government.
Blinken must ask our government to open up a political space to all those who want to participate actively in political life.
The U.S. diplomatic efforts come as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made his own tour of Africa, where he blamed Western sanctions on Russia for souring food prices. The head of the Russian diplomacy went to Egypt, Congo, Uganda, and Ethiopia at the end of July. This is Antony Blinken's second trip to sub-Saharan Africa. Since taking office last year, he visited Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal.
To the eastern part of the African continent, Tuesday's election will be a crucial test for the stability of East Africa's largest economy. Preliminary election results in Kenya showed a close race between the 2 leading candidates competing to succeed President Uhuru Kenyatta. Voters hope the announcement of winner wouldn't spark violence like previous elections. The 3-day unprovoked bombing of Gaza by the Zionist forces last week killed at least 45 Palestinians, including 16 children, and injured hundreds. The Zionist missile strikes on the Gaza Strip, living under illegal blockade for over 16 years, destroyed homes and killed innocent civilians. A member of Iran's top Revolutionary Guard Corps was accused by the United States on Wednesday of planning to kill John Bolton, a national security advisor to former President Donald Trump. The Justice Department asserted that Sahrama Pour Safi, also known as Mahdi Rizai, was probably determined to assassinate Bolton out of retaliation for the passing of Qasem Soleimani, a commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was killed in U.S. drone strike in January 2020.
This is a plot by the Iranian government against a former official of the U.S. government. I can't say a lot of things, but I can say I'm not the only one that the Ayatollahs in Tehran are trying to assassinate. So this is the kind of government we have in Iran.
Artillery missile fire killed at least 13 people and injured 11 others in Ukraine's central Dnipro region on Wednesday. The attack also caused damage to school, residence, an art house, and some city infrastructure. Dnipro-Petrovrsk was one of the first regions bombed when Russian forces launched their offensive in Ukraine on February 24th. In Ergotom, President Petro Putin told Ukrainian television that Russian energy agency Rostom is planning to redirect and connect the Zaporizhzhia plant to Crimean electricity grid. According to Energoatom head, such plan requires damaging power lines that lead to Ukrainian grid, and said at least 3 lines were already damaged. Let's have a listen.
It is a very dangerous situation right now at Zaporozhye because it has only one line of connection to Zaporozhye power, to Ukrainian power system. And that is very bad. If this line is damaged as well, then we will have a blackout situation at Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and after that we will have diesel generators activation, and all 20 diesel generators which are right now on site will be working, will be activated.
Satellite images showed on Tuesday damages made to the Russian Saki air base in Crimea after blasts which killed one civilian and injured 8 more. According to a senior Ukrainian official, the series of explosions at Saki air base could have been the work of Palestinian saboteurs, as Kiev denied and responsibility for incident. Moscow said the explosions were detonation of stored munition, not the result of any attack. The European Union banned Russian coal imports in response to the military operation in Ukraine as part of sanctions in April. Since then, it's been scrambling to find alternative sources, including Colombia, Australia, and the US. Russia coal imports to the European Union are not permitted for predictable future starting this Wednesday. Taiwan ended its routine military exercises in the southern country of Pingtung on Thursday, where soldiers were seen for the second time this week, firing artillery to simulate a defense against China. The exercises, which had been planned and announced before the start of the current cross-strait tensions, came a day after China's military announced it had completed various tasks. Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Mtalla Mamra, met Wednesday with Azerbaijani counterpart Ceyhun Bayramov in Baku. Mamra was on a working visit to Azerbaijan as a special envoy of President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. According to a ministerial statement, Algerian Foreign Minister reviewed with Azerbaijani official bilateral relations between Algeria and Azerbaijan, as well as regional and international issues of common interest. Former U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday he refused to answer questions during an appearance before New York State's Attorney General in civil investigation into his family's business practices, citing his constitutional right against self-incrimination. Islam said,
"This is the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. This is how U.S. former President Donald Trump described New York State probe into his business dealings on Wednesday. Trump refused to answer questions during a testimony before New York Attorney General Letitia James, who is investigating the Trump Organization's business practices.
Now that the discovery phase is concluding, the parties are going to line up their experts and get ready for trial. Again, Trump has tried to stop this civil lawsuit at every step. He's lost at the New York appellate courts time and time again. So now that he's been unable to get the case dismissed, I don't see settlement happening here for both legal and political reasons. So,
the New York civil investigation involves allegations that Trump's company, the Trump Organization, misstated the value of prized assets like golf courses and skyscrapers, misleading lenders and tax authorities.
It's an important case, and the reason is that allegations are that Trump and his businesses submitted false documents in support of bank loans. That's a felony, but it could also be a civil fraud claim, and we're dealing with the latter here.
Trump, who is expected to run for the 2024 presidential election, emailed a statement saying he wouldn't answer any question, recalling his constitutional right against self-incrimination and accusing the Democratic Attorney General of openly campaigning on a policy of destroying him.
I decline to answer the questions under the rights and privileges afforded to every citizen under the United States Constitution.
According to his lawyer, Trump answered one question, his name, during a 4-hour session. Jurors could take his silence into account, which may lead to a trial. Trump's testimony comes amid his continuous legal problems surrounding him, which came right after the raid of FBI agents into his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida.
Within the same country, U.S. consumer prices did not increase in July due to a sharp drop in the cost of fuel, bringing the first prominent sign of relief for Americans who have watched inflation hike over the past 2 years. Sofiane Kanturi.
Americans experienced a small respite from the pain of high inflation last month, thanks to falling gas, airline, and clothing prices. Though overall prices increases only modestly slowed from the 4-decade high that was reached in June. Wednesday's Consumer Price Index report, which showed that while inflation is still high, it has moderated somewhat from a 40-year peak. This was praised by President Joe Biden.
Actually, I just want to say a number. 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. 0%. Here's what that means. While the price of some things went up last month, the price of other things went down by the same amount.
In July, consumer prices increased 8.5% over the same month last year. The government reported on Wednesday, down from a 9.1% increase in June after 25 months of price increases. Prices did not change on a monthly basis between June and July.
The change in prices between those 2 months stayed, relatively speaking, flat. So that's probably what he's referring to at this point in time, that when we report on numbers, we're looking at annual numbers, but when we're looking at certain changes month over month, we had a flat change in inflation.
After more than a year of constant increases that have strained household finances, short Americans on the economy caused the Federal Reserve to raise borrowing rates aggressively and decrease President Joe Biden's public support. The July figures gave rise to hope that inflation might have peaked.
To Europe, German Finance Minister Christian Lindner on Wednesday announced measures to raise tax, wages and increase child benefits slightly. The plans are intended to help ease the burden of rising inflation for households amid rising food and energy prices. Rather than directly cutting taxes, the proposal would raise the brink from which tax is paid, including the level from which the highest rate is charged. Thousands of Argentinian protesters assembled in front of the president's office in Buenos Aires on Wednesday, calling for a better income and state and aid and meeting with a new Minister of Economy. The demands came amid a surging cost of living intensified by COVID-19 and the conflict in Ukraine.
Every day, prices of the whole basic baskets of goods are rising steadily. We're talking about the basics: meat, bread, milk, vegetables. It is impossible to eat vegetables. Our children don't drink milk. They drink tea. Milk has ceased to exist in our neighborhoods.
Kim Yoo-jong, the younger sister of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, said that he had suffered from fever symptoms while vowing deadly retaliation against South Korea, which the North blames for causing the outbreak. Her remarks at meeting on COVID policy with thousands of unmasked officials, citing indoors indicators for the first time that Kim was likely infected with the virus.
Even though he was seriously ill with a high fever, he could not lie down for a moment, thinking about the people he had to take care of until the end, in the face of the anti-epidemic war.
At least 16 homes have been destroyed and more than 6,000 hectares of land have been burned down by devastating wildfires that tore through southwest France on Wednesday. The fires, which have struck France at the altitude of its worst ever drought and on the eve of a new heat wave with temperature expected to reach 40 degrees Celsius.
It's a bitter fight as we speak. What's going to happen tonight? The fire has learned how to surprise us. I don't know. The fire spiraled like snail's shell. It came back on its tracks. It then went off to the south, then to the north.
Normally you have more than 2 meters under the ship, but now you have only 14 centimeters in some places. And then for us, the challenge is to get past those points without damaging the ship.
Wildfire burning through the forest of National Park in central Portugal raged for the fifth continuous day. Over 1,000 firefighters are on the ground to deal with the blaze, which started on Saturday in the council of Covilhã and has spread to some neighboring areas. The Taliban has broken its own promises to women, many of whom have been forced to leave their working lives behind. The careers have been ruined, their education rendered worthless. Many now struggle to survive and put food on the tables.
The Taliban have broken multiple pledges of respecting human and women's rights since taking over Afghanistan a year ago. In March, the Taliban backtracked on their announcement to open girls' high schools, saying they would remain closed until further ado. Karisma Rashidi was a proud high school student before the Taliban deprived her from her basic right. Although she was prohibited from school, she refused to give up. Now she attends classes at a private education center for girls, hoping that one day she pursues her dream of becoming a journalist.
I want to become a successful journalist in the future. I would love to serve my country, and education is my basic human right.
Taliban undermining women's rights did not end with curbs on education. It also expanded to their clothes and movements. Monessa Mubarez, fighting for her rights in Afghanistan, used to work for the finance ministry and lost her job when the militant regime seized power. Ever since, Mubarez has devoted herself to activism, having organized 17 street protests so far.
We will raise our voices against every injustice until our last breath. We will stand against all the tyranny imposed by the Taliban on the people of Afghanistan, especially on the women of Afghanistan.
Going over her past life, Gulistan Safari is looking at work certificates of her time as a police officer in Kabul.
My job was so valuable for me. I loved my job. We were so happy. But when the Taliban came, they did not allow us to go to work.
Despite losing her husband to cancer 2 years ago, Safari was a happy mother and grandparent. Now, she cleans houses to provide for a household of 5.
I usually work from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. It's a really boring job, but I have no other choices, no other income. We die if I don't work.
The absence of women in workspaces in Afghanistan not only affects their household, but also it makes an entire economy dysfunctional. With Afghanistan economic crisis, billions of dollars in aid and reserves have been cut off, and ordinary people have little money for their necessities, and many families are struggling to make ends meet.
Dozens of people are feared to have died off the coast of Greece after the boats sank while attempting to make the dangerous crossing from Turkey. Efforts by Greece's Navy and Air Force to rescue up to 50 people who went down with the vessel in the stormy water of Rhodes had shown no signs of progress by late Wednesday. The official Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup hospitality booking site has listed Palestine as a country option, making no mention of the so-called Israel on the list. A listing which previously showed as Palestinian territory occupied before being changed to Palestine received global praise from pro-Palestinian supporters while sending Israelis online into a frenzy. This entity, so-called Israel, is not listed among Middle East countries in a section of the FIFA website and not even listed in the section for Europe either. A move that led all social media pro-Palestinian users salute Qatar for listing Palestine instead of the entity. With this news, we reach the reminder of our main top stories. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Freetown, Sierra Leone on Wednesday, protesting inflation and the rising cost of living in the West African country. U.S. charges Iranian man of a suspected plot to kill the ex-Trump advisor, John Bolton. Satellite images appear to show major damage and number of destroyed Russian warplanes at Crimea Air Base following explosions there this week. A year ago, since taking over Afghanistan's ruling, Taliban authorities have imposed severe restrictions on women's and girls' rights. Several regions across Sudan have again witnessed heavy rainstorms on Tuesday, killing at least 3 people and partially destroying hundreds of homes across River Nile state. That's all for now. For more updates, follow our social media platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you. Have a blessed day.